Welcome to E-commerce with Coffee, a podcast powered by Amber Engine, where we share e-com secrets for brands over your favorite brew. We start with the caffeine and then leap enthusiastically into behind-the-scenes e-com insights that led to the success of our guests. I'm Nate Svoboda, and I'm about to serve you up the best. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode of E-commerce with Coffee. On this episode, we get to speak with Erik Huberman. He is the founder and CEO of Hawke Media, which is a full-service outsourced chief marketing officer. So we're going to be talking a lot today about how to establish healthy relationships between the business and the agency. So Erik, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Really excited for the conversation today. Now, before we dive in, you're one of the busiest people I've ever spoken to. I'd imagine caffeine plays a role in your life to some degree. Would I be right?
No, there were times I'm not like allergic to it, but I do actually have a pretty poor reaction to caffeine. I'll spike and valley really bad. When I say valley really bad, like tomorrow, if I drink coffee today, I'll be on fire, I'll feel great, and then tomorrow I will feel like I want to die. And so it's hard to get up in the morning kind of level. So I get addicted super fast to it. And I just, I went through phases and finally just went cold turkey. It was like, this thing isn't good for me
So
personally.
do you need anything in the morning to get yourself going? Like some people meditate, some people do like, a, a vitamin smoothie every morning, or do you just have that natural energy?
It depends on the morning. A lot of times I get up and just go. I need a few minutes to get into my head and then I'm fine. But if I do wake up and feel a little groggy, I might actually do a bunch of jumping jacks or something to just get my heart rate up myself. But that's about it.
Man, that's, a lot of people should follow that model. I love that. Well, Erik, diving into the conversation today, right? You really excited to talk about, obviously, the book that you guys just released, talk about Hawke Media, the service you offer, but can you talk to us a little bit about your background and sort of what brought you down the path you're on today?
Yeah. How far to go back? I grew up with an entrepreneurial dad and an entrepreneurial grandfather. And so I just always assumed that I could take a job, but it was probably to learn something because eventually I would just start my own thing. So, I think I was nurtured to be an entrepreneur in that way. I remember at a young age, I knew I'd have jobs at a point, but it was always a stepping stone to probably building my own thing. And that was highlighted in a class that I had in 8th grade. A friend's dad had us tour around local businesses and learn about how they were run from the owners. So it was just always very prominent in my upbringing. So when I graduated college, I had spent all of college taking jobs to learn, whether it was Cutco, which I know we have in common, and learning how to sell because I was told sales is important in everything you do. And I worked in real estate and I actually ended up starting a business in college, which was filtering storm drains with a partner, and then realized after a few months that was not something I wanted to do the rest of my life and moved on. Longer story there. But I went into real estate when I graduated college, and I started, after getting my license and everything, I started 1 week to the day before the entire banking industry collapsed in the United States in 2008. And so after about 6 months, because I especially didn't know what was going on, but no one knows what that means. Kind of like think about the first 2 weeks of COVID, where it was like, we're going back to work in 2 weeks. Like no one knew in 2008 when that first happened, like what that actually meant. And so after 6 months, I realized it meant that I was going to make $350 that year working in real estate, which is not enough to live in LA. So
Just a little bit off. Just a
a
little.
little off. It was tough. So I was in a lot of debt and I started scrambling and I decided to start an online business coaching platform for musicians and launched that, built it for 2 years. It was profitable. I went from making $350 a year to minimum wage, which is actually a huge jump. So felt, like I was all right there. And after a couple of years, decided it was never going to be big enough to send my future children to college or anything. So I needed to go figure out what I was going to do with my life and ended up building a t-shirt subscription company called Swag of the Month that I sold after about a year and a half. Full transparency, I sold it for just enough to pay off all the debt 4 years of startups and real estate got me into. So I was basically flat broke, but no longer negative. And then got offered a bunch of jobs. And that was the first time I realized that I was actually worth something in the market and 6-figure salary jobs. And I ended up joining an incubator called Science, helping advise. They had just launched Dollar Shave Club and helped advise on their companies. And then I joined they had a vitamin company that was really off track. I helped pivot that to be a women's activewear brand subscription site. We built it for a year, sold it to Bally Total Fitness. I left, started consulting and advising for a bunch of brands, and realized how broken the marketing ecosystem was, and that 99% of agencies out there have no idea what they're doing, and the few that are good are really expensive, want long contracts, high minimums, and are hard to work with. So this original idea, which was better articulated later as accessibility to great marketing, started coming up, and we built a little SWAT team, with a bunch of each with their own expertise, like a Facebook marketer, a fractional CMO, an email marketer, a web designer, and then went to these companies I was advising for and just said, hey, everything's a la carte, month to month. We can spin up what you need when you need it, and we'll be super flexible, but we're going to be the best at what we do. And that's how it started. And now, fast forward, it's been 8 years. Company's still bootstrapped. We're 320 people, I think, is around the headcount at this point. We've got a venture fund. We've got a financing arm that we help our clients with working capital as well. And I've got my book coming out soon called The Hawke Method that's already for sale on Amazon, Walmart, Target, all that. Really gunning for the bestseller status.
Yeah, well, so first of all, for people listening, as of today, they're actually ranked as a LinkedIn top startup, which, I mean, seems like a pretty cool accolade. I don't know if you guys think it is, but I think it's pretty cool.
That was funny because a lot of these accolades, it's coming. Like I know that ahead of time, they'll be like, you're a finalist and just awarded. That just came out, and I started getting congratulatory texts and stuff. I was like, what'd I do? So
yeah. But hey, you're just, your business as usual, right? And that's a good thing. So this is an open-ended question, but I imagine you've probably been asked before, so you probably have an answer to this. Out of all of the pieces of the business that you've touched, out of all the experiences, the successes, the learnings you've had, what would you say is like the key learning that you take away from, all of that experience up to today?
Yeah, that running a business is an absolute shit show, but it's by choice. And I think it's that combination. So what I mean by that is, no matter what business it is or how long you've been in business, if you're the head of the business, you're going to be dealing with the biggest problems of the business. And unless you're running a business that's status quo, which there's an old cliche, if you're not growing, you're dying. So I always worry about status quo and running business. If you're trying to do anything, things are going to break, and you're going to end up with the biggest problems, because generally as you grow, you hire people to deal with the more easier problems. And so what that means is, by nature, I mean, I always look at like Tim Cook or Jeff Bezos, or look at the top of the list, so to speak, of the biggest companies in the world, Elon Musk. You're dealing with like antitrust law and geopolitical problems, and Congress people deciding to put their political campaign on making you the bad guy, and like all sorts of things that come out of that. And you put a target on your back the bigger you get. And so knowing that, and then recognizing that I could always go get a job if that's too much for me. So like kind of holding the power. And there's a whole bunch of stories that go into this it took me a while to learn this. But once I did, it made this whole thing so much more fun, because then when those big problems come up that you've got to deal with, you're like, yeah, this is part of it. Like, we're going to do this, this, and this. Like, the emotion kind of goes out of it, and you don't deal with the low values. And you hear a lot about like mental health problems in entrepreneurs and suicide in entrepreneurs. And I think like that comes from not accepting the fact that two things. One, it's going to happen. There's no finish line as an entrepreneur. Unless you exit, like that is a finish line. But I mean, while you're running a business, it's not like one day you solve the last problem. That never happens. So once you recognize that, and then you also recognize the fact that you're doing this by choice, I think that sort of, again, that ownership and that power comes back, and then, yeah, you can make your decision. And then these problems become challenges, which I think is an important distinction. It's more like it's another, challenge in a video game, so to speak. It's like, this is the next thing you have to accomplish.
Yeah, I like the way that you put that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're right. You're bringing more people onto your team so that you can focus on the bigger picture stuff, and you're doing it by choice, right? It's a full contact sport. I feel like I've heard before. Entrepreneurship is definitely a full contact sport.
Yeah.
I guess diving into more, your business, your team, can you talk to us about Hawke Media, right? Obviously, you're an outsourced CMO. Can you talk to us a little bit about, that model and how you got away from just traditional, CMO marketing?
Yeah. So we just found that so there's tons and tons and tons of digital agencies out there. I haven't seen the stats in like 5 years, but when I did, it was like 25,000 in the US. So there's tons of people running Facebook ads for companies or YouTube ads or whatever they're choosing to do. But the strategic side of it seemed to be falling short, because frankly, I think that most of those companies don't understand how Facebook ads actually fall into the ecosystem of a brand. And now we're seeing with the iOS changes the past 8 months that, look how many companies are falling off. And, I'm hearing things like, it's the DDC, it's D2C hell right now, and no one can figure it out. And then we look at our clients, we're doing fine. Like, what are you talking about? And what it is they don't have a strategic angle. And so when we started this came from a strategic place first, and then we had all the execution arms. So it literally was me. I was the first outsourced CMO. I was advising and consulting for companies, looking at their marketing strategies and figuring out what was missing and starting there. And then we built out the team. So to answer your first part of your question, how we work is we go into brands, we identify where the holes are in their marketing strategy, whether it's, and we just look at their analytics, we look at what their practices are, we look at their finances, and then we identify where the holes are, and then we'll spin up different experts a la carte month to month to plug those holes. And then again, the reason for month to month is then as those holes get plugged and they may not need us to do more content or more whatever it is, we can turn things on and off as they're needed. So we end up being a long-term partner for a lot of these brands. What we're doing changes constantly, but we're still partners kind of thing.
And then so are the are the marketing operations happening that are being strategically directed by you or not your team as the CMO? Are these people on Hawke Media side, or are they people that you're placing within the client organization? I guess, is it just work like a normal kind of agency model from that point?
Yeah, different agencies work differently. How we work, it's usually fractional time and attention. So it's people at our company are working on, let's say, 4 to 6 companies. Depends on the service. Like certain things we can, let them manage more. Depends on what we're doing. And so the company gets a fractional resource for way cheaper than they would hire in-house too. So the cost effectiveness and the efficiency of it's there. And then, they're on our end. They're full-time for us.
Okay. And I'm glad you said that, because my next question, so, obviously I'm sure there's a significant cost savings associated with hiring an in-house CMO. What besides cost savings are generally, advantages or reasons for outsourcing the position?
Yeah, we're more cost effective than insourcing a CMO, but we also, there's a bunch. One of the biggest challenges I see is like, good luck vetting marketing talent to come in house. Like everyone can say they're certified on Facebook. It really doesn't mean anything. And like our business is to be the best at what we do. Like that is how we stay in business, and we're month to month. So like the proof is in the pudding if we're sustainable. And so we have to build a good team and be good at what we do. So you kind of skipped all the risk, and the marketing and sales is where the opportunity cost really happens in business too. And so it's not just the cost of like, you're going to hire someone that's not very good and, oh God, their salary. They're managing how much money, which needs to produce how much money. And that's what we look at is, if we're managing, let's say, $1 million a month ad spend, and we need that to produce $4 million a month, and you're talking about our fee on that of $100,000 a month, I'm just doing round numbers, our $100,000, you might be able to look in house and try to save some money there and hire a few people that are cheaper. But the $4 million could quickly become 3.9, and now you just wipe that whole benefit. So literally shifting, 2.5% of your marketing, your marketing returns going down 2.5% literally covers us up or down. So that in terms of the cost efficiency, there's a lot of the performance side too that people miss. And then, but yeah, in terms of why people hire us, cost effectiveness is probably less of a thing, even though we try to be cost effective, but we're not necessarily a savings. It's more, we have the forest from the trees view. That's one of the biggest ones. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients. We manage marketing right now for about 650 brands, and we've worked with over 4,000, I think, at this point. And so you get that amount of client base and that amount of data and that amount of knowledge that we're bringing to the table. What we've noticed and seen over the years is when companies in-house, those people that come in usually have a great feel of the market for about 6 months, maybe a little more, but 6 months has seemed to be their magic number. That after 6 months, all of a sudden their marketing starts to decline because they have no purview into what's going on in the ecosystem. They only know their own lens right here. And easy example of this is if your Facebook ads are declining, your returns are, is it because something's wrong with your company or is it Facebook? You have no idea unless you have that outside perspective. So that's one big one. And again, identifying talent and bringing them in is another big one. And and the flexibility. Like you could hire a full-time Facebook marketer, but what if tomorrow you're really focused on TikTok? Is that Facebook marketer going to win TikTok, or would you rather have a good TikTok marketer? So that ebb and flow is big too. And then from a general sense, people hire us for expertise or bandwidth. They either don't have the time to do it or they don't know how to do it. It's pretty simple.
The piece that you said that resonated most with me, right, to your point, this is a fairly broad brush I'm painting with, but I would imagine that doing Facebook advertising, it's an art form to a degree, but it's also very procedural, right? There's like a process to follow. There's something that works, and you can experiment, but there's something that's proven that works, right? having people that are working with 800 or 900 or let alone 8,000 other brands, right? That validates it, and you can be more confident that what is happening on your side is what works. So that very much so resonated with me. I appreciate you said that. Now, sort of taking the flip on all of this a little bit, are there any cases where it would make more sense for a brand to have an in-house CMO? Kind of almost making the argument against?
No, totally. I actually, eventually, pretty quickly, it becomes the answer is both. I see so many companies go binary, like we're outsourcing marketing, or we're gonna do everything in-house. It's like, why does it have to be one or the other and not a balance of both? So I actually believe in a balance. I think every company needs a CMO at one stage, or a later stage. Like maybe in the very beginning you don't, frankly, because you can't attract a senior enough person and pay them enough to get someone that's good. But once you can afford to get a good head of marketing, you need a head of marketing. You need someone that's going to manage us. We're not full time for you, nor are we in the company. So we do need an internal decision maker to make certain calls that we can't responsibly make for you because of a conflict. You're still paying us as a service business. So having people in-house, we do report to the CEO usually first, and then eventually they bring on a marketing manager that we collaborate with, and then usually we end up with some sort of head of marketing, a director, a VP, a CMO that we're working with collaboratively. And so with our fractional CMO part, usually that becomes an advisor to that person, where it goes back to that forest from the trees thing, where we have so much data and knowledge of what's going on. Having another set of eyes for a CMO, we charge $5,000 a month for that service. We go back to the lever on that. Like if you're spending a certain amount of money, that $5,000 a month is easy to account for in optimization. Working with the CMO, we can help that CMO be more effective because we can bring them a lot more information than they can gather themselves internally at your company. And so
right, I mean, the ROI is directly coming from the service.
Correct. And so CMOs hire us just as much as CEOs.
Right. Now, this is something that I just kind of thought about. Do you often have companies then that, they'll work with Hawke, they'll eventually decide that they want to take things, take the reins on their own? What would that handoff process look like? Is that a pretty seamless thing for a brand? I guess what I'm really asking is, are there any risks to, okay, you outsource the process, and then when you decide to take those reins back, what does that look like?
So we intentionally make it really easy because we're looking at this long term. We're not trying to make anyone work with us that doesn't want to. And it's to our detriment, maybe, how easy we make it to transition. That being said, I'm almost always, I've heard this same line over again. And again, 8 years in, you kind of hear the same line over and over again, and people think they're original. It's sad. But if things are working and they decide to bring it in-house, 99 out of 100 times, they're about to fuck their own marketing up. And excuse my French, but it is incredible how many times I've had this conversation with brands where I'm like, they're like, hey, we're going to try to do this ourselves. And I'm like, so let me start. Is anything broken? They're like, no. I'm like, are we performing well? Yeah. Are we too expensive? No, we'll probably pay the same amount. I'm like, well, then why? They're like, we just feel better if this was here. So it's an emotional decision. I'm like, okay, but I've seen this before. And again, I go back to give it 6 months. Those people won't know what they're doing anymore. You're going to start seeing declines in your marketing. You're not going to know why. And it's going to take forever to recover. You're going to lose money and you may end up underwater. And every time we have that conversation, sometimes they go, you know what, you're right. Why are we doing this? I'm like, we can piece it, take some stuff in-house. Let us keep some stuff. You don't have to cold turkey it. But I think about every time that they've just been like, no, this is something we want to do. It's again, an emotional decision. That company has gone really south. And I don't just say that. It's, people forget to delete their Google Analytics with us, and we watch it over and over again that we had a whole plan and strategy set up. We had a ton of people with context as to what's going on. They bring in a whole new team, cut us off. We even onboard their team and give them everything. But again, it's just what's happening today. A month from now, things change. They don't know how to be nimble. They don't know what's going on in the market. And so pretty quickly, those companies decline. And we've seen companies literally go from skyrocketing with us, decide they have capital now, whether they just raised a round or whatever it is, they're going to build a team in-house. And 6 months later, they're bordering bankruptcy.
What would you say are some of the, and this is, you have so many conversations, this may be hard to answer. What would you say are some of the most common things that you find yourself discussing with the business leaders when they, initially begin having conversations? And you may not be part of all those discussions, right? I'm sure you have teams that run them, but I guess what are some of those common things that people are discussing initially?
Yeah, I mean, they're always discussing how do we grow more, grow faster and for cheaper. Like that's common. But I would say the thing that I see missed the most is the idea of a purchase cycle. It's something that I have to constantly remind my own team of, remind our clients of, frankly. And now we have it like in our systems that thankfully the reminders are getting less. But it's just people forget very quickly that from the time someone sees an advertisement to the time they actually buy a product from that company or a service, there is a time period. And it's not hours. It's not a day usually. The averages are weeks to months. And like what we've seen is for a $50 average order value on e-commerce, the average purchase cycle is around 3 weeks. For $100, it's about 5 weeks. For $200, it's about 6 weeks. And then it trails off after that, between 2 and 3 months on any impulse buy. And so knowing that, when we run up ad spends, and we start looking at their performance a week later, well, we haven't even seen the half-life of the purchase cycle. So that performance is negligible. It means nothing. And so the biggest challenge we run into there is when companies are trying to scale their advertising. If I went from like the example I give, we take a company, they're spending 10 grand a month, let's say. And all of a sudden we ramp them up and now they're spending 100 grand a month. So 3 grand a day from, 300 a day. And so we ramp it up. Their returns are still going to look like let's say it's a $50 order value. Their returns for the next 3 weeks are still going to be reporting basically off of that 300 a day because the 3,000 a day hasn't ramped up enough and given people enough time to actually start buying. And so if we report their ROAS the next week after we ramp up to 3,000 a day and we've spent $21,000 instead of $2,100 and they've made 8 grand, well, let's say 10 grand. So 10 grand on $2,100 is great. But we just spent 21,000. So now it looks like we are losing half their money and not making anything back. That's where we see a lot of companies end up cutting off their nose to spite their face because they can't comprehend the idea that like, no, it takes time. They think we're just buying time or it's some ethereal thing that you can't nail down. It's like, no, it's actually very scientific. And in 3 weeks, you should see that performance.
It's delayed gratification. There have been psychology studies on it, right? Yeah,
exactly. And working capital becomes a thing there too, because if you're spending $21,000 a week and not making it back for 3 or 4 weeks, well, you're in the hole $60,000, $80,000. Companies need to be able to sustain that to grow, which is why people say growth is expensive.
Well, right, especially if they have any type of funding, because then they're going to be getting grilled by the people that are above them, right? So I can only imagine the headaches.
And even worse, bootstrapped, because you might not have any funding. So now we're off just the cash you have, which makes it a little both are stressful. Frankly.
Yeah, right. Neither is the ideal situation. Yeah. So, obviously the model at Hawke is different in some ways than the traditional agency model. But one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, I would describe the relationship between, the average brand or business and the average agency as fairly, contentious, right? It's not necessarily always, adversarial. I guess, how would you describe the current state of relationship between the agency and the business?
Yeah, I think we joke. So I mentioned earlier that people hire us for bandwidth or expertise. We joked for a while that people actually hire us for 3 reasons: bandwidth, expertise, or a punching bag. We just try to avoid the punching bag clients. And I would say, I actually wrote an article about this for Entrepreneur Magazine like 6 years ago, and it got us a bunch of clients because so I have a lot of vendors too. I have, I think, 4 different PR firms. We don't do PR ourselves. Again, launching the book, I have a book agency, I have a speaking agency, I have all these things. And you realize when you hire someone to do a service for you, your job should be to enable them in every way you can. Like you've already made a decision that these people can do this for you better than you can do it for yourself. So like, do everything you can to make it easy on them. And what I find is the people that do that are here to collaborate, here to support, they're like, what can I do to make your job easier and help you succeed more? Crush it with us. And what I see a lot of times though is people almost hire vendors and then test them. Like, well, we'll see how you do. Well, if you go in like that, it's like going into any type of relationship with let's see how you do. If you went into dating that way, you're going to wait for the person to fuck up and you're going to bail. I took this advice myself and I've given it to a lot of people. It's like literally going on a first date and deciding if you want to marry someone. Like, don't do that, because 99 out of 100 times there's no fucking way you're going to be like, I want to spend the rest of my life with this person the first time you meet them. It's very rare. And most people that say love at first sight, I think it's bullshit. So goes back to a little bit of an inside joke. Going to a wedding where the guy said that in his vows. But the thing about that relationship is you need to look, like if you go in with the intent of I'm going to make this work with any type of vendor, including your marketing agency, it forces you to take a different tactic. You won't hold back. Like I've seen people do things like spot a mistake or spot a something in their analytics that shows like, oh, we should be looking at this, and they wait to see if we spot it too, to test us. And it's like, well, listen, we have 100 things going on with you too. Maybe we will once in a while. We'll make a mistake too. Everyone's human. And if you're not here to collaborate with us and catch that and be another set of eyes, like you just hurt yourself more than you even hurt us. Like, what are you doing? So we deal with that. And I've noticed that the number one thing that drives a good relationship between agency and a customer, and frankly, what keeps our clients, is communication. Keeping that open communication, being really on the same team, setting expectations, talking through things, being transparent, those are really critical things. I will say, and thankfully we do have a good team, but I'd say the performance of the marketing is second to the communication.
Oh, 100%. Because to your point, right, even if your team had, let's say your team does miss something, right, that's the whole point of a partnership, right? Like if you notice the error and the other team doesn't, bring it up to them and collaborate on the solution, right? I've heard of that, especially being from the software world. And yeah, I mean, it's just that it's not a good foundation for a collaborative partnership.
Yeah, and you see it.
Yeah.
We actually try to walk away now from clients that are there to just beat us up. It's like, what? Do you want to make your business successful? Because we do. Like we have nothing in our DNA. The only thing we want is to grow you because we grow too. Like it's very aligned actually. And so if this is like your poor marketing performance doesn't help us either. So we don't want that. And if we're missing stuff, it's again, those communication gaps. A lot of times you said it gets contentious. There's just no reason for it. We're not their enemy in any way, but it's rare. Thankfully, I'd say that's like a small percentage of the time. The vast majority are actually really great.
Good. Well, one thing I want to make sure I ask you about in this conversation, so I know you just put a book out very recently. Can you talk to us a little bit about, the theme of the book, how it ties into some of the things that we're talking about? I'll just open it up there.
Yeah, so it's pretty direct. I get asked to speak a lot at different conferences and be on podcasts and stuff, and I'm asked a lot about our marketing methodology. We've grown, again, 3,500 to 4,000 brands successfully at this point, and there is a lot of consistency in the way we look at marketing. And so I found myself starting to give the same talk where I was able to articulate the idea of like, we look at marketing in three pillars: awareness, nurturing, and trust. And awareness being, how do you introduce someone new to your product or service? Nurturing, what do you do from when they're introduced to when they purchase and post-purchase to keep them coming back? And then trust, because we found that 75% of people won't buy from a company they don't inherently trust. So how do you build that trust? Also synonymous with brand. So that was the original framework that we started looking at. And then everything from our initial deep dive that we do, our audit to see what a company's missing and what their needs are, through actually doing the marketing and how we adjust and learn over time, all fell into this framework. And so a few years ago, it's been about, I think it's 2.5 years ago, met a guy that had a great book launching company and said, hey, are you interested in writing one? And I said, yeah, I actually think I've got the subject, and worked with him on it, got it done. And launching a book's crazy, but yeah, it's called the Hawke Method again, and pre-selling all over and really trying to get it out there. We've got Columbia and NYU and University of Arizona all picking it up as a textbook, and still working on more colleges. It's really taking off already, which is fun. And it goes back to our mission of the company, which is accessibility to great marketing. We really want to make great marketing, the best marketing, accessible for all. And that comes with us being cost effective, nimble, flexible, and really good at what we do. But if we can have a $16 book that people can buy to at least learn what we do, it's actually, there's one more piece of this. Having our employees read it puts them all on the same page. Having our clients read it makes that communication gap less, because they actually understand how we think and what we do. And sending it to our partners, like, it builds this, and then making it available for anyone that wants to really just understand why we've been successful and how we look at marketing.
Yeah. So your answer is not allowed to be writing the book. What's the hardest part about writing a book?
Oh, it's not writing the book. Writing the book is actually not the hardest part. The hardest part is marketing it, I'd say. And even as a marketer, I like marketing iteratively. I like being very collect data, make a decision, move on, grow, systematically. But with a book, we're trying to hit bestseller lists. The first week of the launch is what matters. So you have to basically throw everything at it. It's kind of like a Kickstarter campaign in that sense, where it's it launches and it goes or it doesn't. And I hate that type of marketing, because you can't learn from your mistakes. You just got to go. Thankfully, we've done this enough. I think we're good. But all the moving parts of getting, our launch is March 8th. And so getting a bunch of pre-sales now, but making March 8th and that week huge, getting throwing everything at it to try to make this a real winner, that's way more hard than actually the content of the book.
That's fair. I'm glad that you gave that answer the way you did, because every time I've asked somebody that, they're like, oh, it's writing the book. That's such a boring answer. But no, absolutely, because iterative marketing is just, that's what people do, right?
Well, in the book, what the contents of the book is, a talk I've given over 7 years, many hundreds of times probably, and it's a subject I know intuitively very, very well. It's all I do. So writing the book wasn't that hard. Editing it was a little harder, but I went through the first round of it very quickly, because it's like I already knew all the content. I just had to put it on paper. So that was easy. Yeah. I would say, though, maybe the people you're asking aren't going for this big launch. So if you're just writing a book and then giving it to friends, putting it on Amazon, calling it a day, yeah, sure. Then there is no other challenge to it, because all you have to do is write the book. You can self-publish on Amazon, and then you're done. But if you want to go for it and really, I like to, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it right. And so when we decided to go for this, it was like, we're going to go for the lists. We're going to, get it out there.
Very cool. Well, I will definitely be going and checking it out based on what we talked about today. Well, Erik, where can our listeners get in touch with your team if, anything that we've said has resonated, they want to, engage with your services, or maybe they are just interested and they want to talk to you about, the book or outsourcing CMOs?
So really easy, hawkemedia.com. If you want to talk to our team, you can just sign up for a free consultation. That's easy. And then for me personally, @/Erik Huberman on any social media channel. I'm pretty available.
Awesome. Cool. Well, really, really appreciate you sharing your time with us today, and look forward to having you back on for some future conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Erik. That's it for this episode of E-commerce with Coffee, powered by Amber Engine. If you haven't gotten your fix yet, be sure to get more e-commerce brand secrets on our website at amberengine.com. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes.